Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. Today, we are diving deep into a really fascinating chapter from our source text. It's titled Chapter 1, The Nature of Things, Jean-Jacques Rousseau and the Fallacy of Natural Goodness. We're going to explore the life and, honestly, the sheer impact of an 18th century philosopher who fundamentally completely changed how we view ourselves. Yep, we're talking about Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Now, the source material we're unpacking today makes a pretty provocative argument. It suggests that Rousseau's core, famous idea, this belief in the inherent natural goodness of humanity, actually unmoored our entire society from its historical foundation, leading to what the text literally describes as a philosophical shipwreck. It's a heavy, urgent topic for sure, but seeing how these ideas shaped the modern world around us is going to be incredibly illuminating. So let's get into it. Here is our quick roadmap for today's explainer. We'll start with 1, the abandoned anchor. Then 2, Rousseau's compass. 3, the reign of terror. 4, failed utopian experiments. And finally, 5, recognize, resist, restore. All right, let's jump right into part 1, the abandoned anchor. To really grasp the text's argument here, you've kind of got to picture society as a massive ship. For centuries, the source notes, this ship was held steady by a very specific, incredibly heavy anchoring worldview. It's represented by passages like Romans 7:18. This embodies the Calvinist and Orthodox Christian view of humanity. Basically, it's the idea that mankind is naturally fallen, broken, and honestly prone to vice rather than virtue. Now, according to the author, this rather sobering view of human nature was the anchor. It kept society grounded because it demanded that humans recognize their inherent flaws and rely on an external, higher standard of truth to keep their darker, more selfish inclinations in check. But then, right in the 1700s, along comes Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He writes in his book Emile, everything is good as it leaves the hands of the author of things, everything degenerates in the hands of man. The source argues that with ideas like this, Rousseau effectively severed that old heavy anchor. And what did he hand society instead? Well, the text metaphorically calls it a Jack Sparrow compass. If you've seen the movies, you know that compass doesn't point to true north. It points to whatever the person holding it desires most in that moment. Rousseau essentially told humanity, hey, your natural, primitive instincts are actually inherently good. It's civilization, property, and strict institutions that corrupt you. So this sets up the absolute central conflict of our source material. On one side, you have the biblical or Calvinist view. Humanity is fallen, prone to selfishness, and desperately requires external intervention. Things like discipline, structured habits, and a higher moral law to actually become good. Directly opposing that is Rousseau's view. Humanity is inherently good. And if we just strip away artificial societal constraints, our natural empathy and goodness will just organically flourish. The author of our text argues that this marks a massive fundamental shift. It's a shift from philosophy, which tries to reform human desires to match an absolute truth, to ideology, which tries to reform truth to match our subjective desires. Which brings us to part 2, Rousseau's compass. So where on earth did Rousseau get these ideas? Well, the text points out this wild historical irony. He was actually born in Geneva in 1712 and raised by a super strict Calvinist father. He grew up completely steeped in these rigid teachings of human depravity and predestination. And it was in direct rebellion against that strict upbringing that he introduced what the source isolates as Idea 1 in its catalog of historical bad ideas, this foundational premise that human beings are just good by nature. Now, the text totally concedes that Rousseau had some genuinely good ideas, especially about education, things like respecting a child's autonomy and learning through hands-on experience. But, the author argues, the absolute easiest way to smuggle a bad idea into society is to intermingle it with a hint of truth. Rousseau packaged this fatally flawed premise of natural goodness deep inside incredibly appealing, progressive educational theories. And that brings us to a really critical concept from his 1762 work, The Social Contract. He called it the general will. Rousseau proposed that society should be guided by the collective interests of the people. Sounds totally democratic, right? Well, the source warns that this abstract concept was actually incredibly dangerous. Why? Because it allowed leaders to claim they were enacting the will of the people as this vague collective, which super easily justified ignoring or even trampling the rights of actual individual people. Let's move on to part 3, the reign of terror. Because, as the text argues, ideas literally never just stay in books. They manifest in the real world. If we trace the currents of this ideology, we see Rousseau publishes major works in 1762. Less than 30 years later, boom, we hit the French Revolution, which was deeply, deeply inspired by his concepts. Moving right into the 1800s, We see his ideas spark these communal utopian experiments, like New Harmony and Brook Farm. The text maps out a very direct ripple effect here, from ink on a page to profound and honestly often chaotic societal upheaval. To explain the sheer chaos of this time, the source introduces a concept it calls the masculine error, or more simply, the hammer. This happens when bad ideas manifest as overt, forceful, and externalized destruction. Think about it. If you truly believe that humanity is naturally good, then the only things standing in the way of a perfect utopia are corrupt institutions and the corrupt people running them. Therefore, in that mindset, you can totally morally justify grabbing a hammer to violently smash those institutions in the pursuit of ideological reform. And this isn't just theory. The text points directly to Maximilien Robespierre and the Jacobins during the French Revolution. They were devout followers of Rousseau. They genuinely believed they were the true executors of the general will. Because they thought they were just returning society to its natural good state, they justified the horrific mass executions of the Reign of Terror for the greater good. The source argues that this is the inevitable, tragic fruit of subjective philosophy. When you have no anchor, those in power just redefine the word good to match their own goals, leading directly to totalitarian ruthlessness. Okay, let's pivot a bit to part 4, failed utopian experiments. Because you might be wondering, what if you don't use a guillotine? What if you just get a group of willing, like-minded people together to live out Rousseau's ideals peacefully? Well, the text impartially reports on 2 major attempts to build this exact vision. First up is Brook Farm in Massachusetts. Founded in 1841, their vision was shared labor and artistic freedom, totally escaping the corruption of modern civilization. The outcome? Intense internal conflict and complete financial ruin in just 6 years. Then there was New Harmony in Indiana, founded in 1825 by Robert Owen. He wanted pure social equality and cooperative living. Despite having immense funding behind it, it collapsed into pure discord and had to be sold off in merely 2 years. Both aimed for a natural utopia, both completely sank. So, why the epic failures? The source breaks it down pretty clearly here. It argues that, completely contrary to what Rousseau thought, humans actually naturally lean towards selfishness. I mean, anyone who has ever watched 2 toddlers fight over a single toy knows this for a fact. Furthermore, a functioning society requires people to do miserable, difficult jobs. Someone has to work in the sewers, right? Literally no one does that out of a natural, joyous desire. Real communal living requires massive self-sacrifice. The text asserts that these utopian ideals failed because you simply cannot maintain societal order just by indulging our natural instincts. It actually requires a higher moral imperative that overrides our selfish nature. Which brings us to the final section, part 5, recognize, resist, restore. The author isn't just trying to give us a history lesson today. They are actually issuing a call to action. The text sets up one final, really powerful contrast. Think about it. If we truly look to nature's order as our ultimate guide, what do we actually see? We see the survival of the fittest. We see power structures driven purely by selfishness, where the strong dominate the weak without a second thought or moral inhibition. The source sharply contrasts this chaotic, brutal reality of nature against the Christian biblical ideal. Here, the standard isn't natural inclination at all. It's self-sacrifice. It's aiming toward a perfect external standard modeled by Christ. The text cites John 15:13, laying down one's life for a friend, as the ultimate example of transcending our selfish natural baseline. And this isn't just ancient history. The text contends we are absolutely still dealing with Rousseau's wreckage today. The author points to modern movements that, in their view, idolize nature over humanity. For instance, the source links Rousseau's philosophy directly to extreme forms of climate activism, the kind that views human beings as a literal plague, sometimes even justifying population control for the quote-unquote greater good of the planet. It also points to the modern rejection of traditional institutions, like redefining marriage based on subjective, constantly evolving desires rather than a fixed design. According to the text, whenever we let our natural desires dictate our morality, we open a very dangerous door to justifying genuinely heinous acts under the highly deceptive guise of compassion. So I'm going to leave you with this final, really provocative question straight from the source. Who should define our societal standards? Are we going to just keep navigating by the broken compass of our natural, subjective desires, hoping against hope it leads to utopia despite all the historical evidence to the contrary? Or do we need to restore our connection to a higher, absolute truth to keep our ship from running aground? I highly encourage you to look around and ponder how these 2 competing views are shaping the world right outside your window today. Thank you so much for hanging out with me for this explainer. Keep asking the big questions, and I'll see you next time.